Page 7 continued. Annotations and explanations. Act 1, Scene 1. 1. 4 days, ellipsis, are solemnities. This is from Act 1, Scene 1, line 7 to 11. The first scene of the drama opens with the entrance of Aunt Hippolyta, accompanied by Philostrate and attendants. Theseus is betrothed to Hippolyta, and their marriage will be taking place in 4 days' time. Theseus appears to be impatient of the intervening days and tells Hippolyta that the slowly waning moon is delaying the realization of his happiness by lengthening the period of 4 days. Hippolyta consoles the Duke in order to ease his impatience and says 4 days that seem so long to the Duke will quickly merge into night, and 4 days will quickly be over in sleep full of happy dreams, and then the solemn celebration of their marriage will take place in silvery moonlight. Page 8. Hippolyta means to say that 4 days which intervene between this day and the day of their marriage will quickly pass in happy dreams, and the anticipated marriage festivities will start under the silver-white beams of the moon. Notes. 4 happy days. The action of the play occupies 2 days and a night, but Shakespeare stretched the time imaginatively to enhance the impatient mood of Theseus. Steep themselves. Be swallowed up in, literally soak themselves. New, bent. This refers to the crescent moon. The moon like to a silver bow. There is some inconsistency here. The wedding is to take place at new moon, and at that time the moon is invisible, yet in this passage the moon is referred to as being visible on the night of wedding. Number 2. Thrice blessed they that, ellipsis, single blessedness. This is from Act 1, Scene 1, 75 to 79. This is a part of Theseus' speech in the first scene of the first act, where he informs Hermia of her fate in case she chooses to disobey her father. He points out the difference between the life of a nun and that of maiden happily settled in life. He admits that those gives who can so once again he admits that those who can give so master their natural inclinations that they can endure to pass through life without the blessing of marriage are indeed really happy in a very lofty sense. But as regards earthly happiness, the rose which is plucked in order to be distilled into scent leads to a happier life in this world than the rose that is left to fade away in the stalk. In other words, as far as earthly joys are concerned, the woman who marries and is settled in a fruitful life of love and affection is far happier and more fortunate than one who passes the entire life in lovely and barren maidenhood. Notes. Rose distilled is rose plucked and distilled for perfume. The metaphor suggests that marriage releases the essence of the maiden's swiftly passing beauty and transmits it to another generation. Virgin thorn. A tree or a shrub armed with thorns, on which a virgin rose blossoms. Virgin here refers to the fact that this rose is not enjoyed by anyone. Single blessedness. The blessedness resulting from a life of celibacy. 3. Or else the law, ellipsis, single life. Act 1, Scene 1, lines 120 to 22. Theseus speaks to Hermia about his fate in case she disobeys her father before he left the stage with others, leaving Lysander and Hermia alone on the stage. He warned Hermia to take care to discipline herself and to suit her youthful ideas to her father's will. Otherwise, the inexorable law of Athens necessarily gives her up and places her absolutely at the disposal of her father. This means that she may have either to die or be condemned to permanent virgin life. This cruel law of Athens is not a respecter of persons, and the Duke himself cannot relax it, not to speak of holding it in abeyance. In other words, Hermia must be very careful in making her choice, and in coming to a final decision, she must try to qualify or correct her fancies, in brackets, that is, fanciful ideas or desires, so as to suit the will of her father. The Duke seems to have a soft corner for Hermia in his heart. He tries his best to bring home to Hermia the fate in store for her in case she decides against her father's command. Page 9. Notes. Arm, prepare. Extenuate means mitigate. Vow of single life. To a life dedicated to celibacy. It may be noted that the Duke in the fourth act overrides the Athenian law and sometimes the marriage between Lysander and Hermia, although they have not had Aegeus's permission, thus doing much more than merely extenuating the law. 4. I swear to thee by Cupid's strongest bow. Ellipsis. Tomorrow truly will I meet with thee. This is from Act 1, Scene 1, lines 171 to 180. This is the reply of Hermia to Lysander's request to meet him in the wood outside Athens. First scene, first act. Hermia readily promises to meet Lysander in the wood outside Athens at the time and place specified by him, and swears by a number of things to strengthen her promise. She swears by the bow, the love of God, and by the stronger of his 2 arrows, which is of gold and inspires the strongest love. She swears by the doves of Venus, which are the perfect emblems of innocence. She swears also by all things which bind lovers together and add to their happiness. She also swears by the funeral pile in which Dido, the queen of Carthage, burnt herself when she saw her faithless lover, Aeneas of Troy, sailing away from her shores. Further, to strengthen the seriousness of her oath, she swears by all the vows made and broken by men, which are more numerous than the vows they made and kept, and exceeds the innumerable times spoken by women. This swearing in the name of almost everything held sacred by Hermia and people in general in those days shows the great love she had for Lysander and her absolute faith in him. Notes. Best arrow, ellipsis, head. Cupid is said in Ovid's Metamorphoses, Act 1, 565 following. Cupid is said in Ovid's Metamorphoses, lines 565 following, to have used arrows of gold to cause love and arrows of lead to repel. Shakespeare knew this work well in Arthur Golding's translation, from which he derived the story of Pyramus and Thisbe for this play. Venus doves. Doves, symbolic of tender love and fidelity, were sacred to Venus. At the end of Venus and Adonis, Venus flies off into the skies in a chariot drawn by silver doves. Carthage Queen. In Virgil's Aeneid 4, Dido sees Aeneas sail away from consigning herself to a funeral pyre. The fire is the emblem of her devotion to her love. Lines 175 to 6. Hermia's teasing anticipates the breaking of his vows by Lysander. 5. Things base and vile, ellipsis, painted blind. Act 1, Scene 1, lines 235 to 38. Helena speaks here of the power of love to transform and the lack of connection between seeing and judgment. Base and vile things have no relation to the value put upon them by love, can be transformed by love to beauty and dignity. Love is conventionally aroused through the eyes, as Helena knows, But the lover sees beauty where others do not, and so looks with the mind or fancy, but not with judgment. Therefore, the flying Cupid, god of love, is shown blind. Therefore, the flying Cupid, god of love, is shown blind. Love is without reason. Judgment cannot explain why one is in love with the other. Notes. Cupid. Cupid was generally represented as blind in medieval and Renaissance art and literature, partly because his arrows hit or miss at random, and partly with reference to the sensual nature of the love they stir, sometimes contrasted with a clear-sighted platonic love. By transference, the lover is, within quotes, blinded about what he loves, so that he judges wrongly of the just, the good, and the honorable, as Plato said in his Laws. Page 10. Act 1, Scene 2. 6. I grant you, friends, if you should fright the ladies out of their wits, they should have no discretion but to hang us all. Ellipsis, for any nightingale. Act 1, Scene 2, line 66-70. These lines occur in the second scene of the first act, where Quince, Bottom, and others discuss the rehearsal of the interlude, Pyramus and Thisbe, which they intend to produce before the Duke of Athens on the occasion of his marriage with Hippolyta. Bottom, the most enthusiastic of them all, wants to play every part, so when Quince tells Snug, the joiner, that he can do the lion's part extempo, as it is nothing but roaring, Bottom jumps to the idea and asks leave to play the lion too. He promises to roar in such a manner that the Duke will ask him to roar again. At this, Quince, who is technically in charge of the production of the interlude, although Bottom virtually does the directing, tells Bottom if he roars terribly he will frighten the Duchess and the other ladies, and they will start shrieking out of fear, and that, according to Quince, will be sufficient to hang Bottom and all his companions. Bottom means here that if Snug roars so as to frighten the ladies, the Duke and the Duchess would have no choice, in brackets discretion, the power of a court of justice to decide a punishment, brackets closed, but his confused way of putting it suggests that they would have no better judgment or discrimination than to hang them all. Bottom says that he will moderate, that is, aggravate Bottom's error or moderate, that is in brackets, his voice, so that he will roar as gently as any suckling dove. I will roar you as if it were the singing of nightingale. Bottom's boasting that if he plays the part of the lion he will roar like, quote, a sitting dove, unquote, or like the nightingale, is ludicrous. Both dove and nightingale sing softly and sweetly, so the comparisons excite laughter. Notes. Aggravate. He means moderate. Sucking dove. Within quote, sitting dove, brackets open, as birds sit on eggs, brackets closed, and sucking lamb, within quotes, both proverbial for mildness and innocence. 7. I will discharge it in either your straw-color beard, your orange tawny beard, your purple in grain beard, or your French crown-color beard, your perfect yellow. Act 1, Scene 2, line 77-80. Bottom is eager to play every part of the interlude, Pyramus and Thisbe. Quince, who is in charge of the production, tells him plainly that he, quote, can play no part but Pyramus, unquote. Thereupon Bottom submits and agrees to undertake it, and asks, quote, what beard were I best to play it in, unquote. Quince gives him absolute freedom on the point and replies, quote, why, what you will, unquote. Then Bottom gets into form and boasts that he can play the part of Pyramus equally well in any kind of beard that is given him. He can play the part with a beard of a color midway between orange and tawny, or with a beard dyed scarlet, or with one that has the color of the gold écu or crown, a French coin having a yellowish color, or even with a beard that is perfect yellow, that is, ordinary yellow as we understand it. Bottom means to say that since Quince has allowed him a free choice of colour, he can put on any beard and do his part in a perfect manner. He is sure of his own inherent quality as an actor. Earlier he boasts that he can play any part of the play from Pyramus to the lion, but he is allowed only one role, Pyramus. So he boasts that he can play that single part in all kinds of beard, if necessary ordinary beard, without impairing the quality of his acting. Page 11. Self-conceit and complacency are the chief features of his character. He can adapt himself in any situation he is placed in without losing his self-composure. Bottom's interest in colour is perhaps appropriate to his trade as a weaver, if irrelevant to Quince's purposes. Bottom has to be clean-shaven, for later he acquires an ass's beard and becomes hairy about his face. Act 4, Scene 1, lines 24-25. Notes: orange tawny, that is tan-coloured. Purple in grain, fast dyed crimson. Purple was associated with red and specially the colour of blood. French crown colour, the gold colour of the French écu or crown as they called it. French crowns, alluding to boldness produced by the French disease syphilis, a common joke. Act 2, Scene 1, 8. Then slip I from her bum, ellipsis, was never wasted there. Act 2, Scene 1, lines 53-57. These lines occur in the first scene of the second act, where Puck, while talking to another fairy, relates one of the mischiefs he practices on unsuspecting villagers. When in a gathering of villagers, an old woman who, because of her age, sets up for authority among her companions is telling a very pathetic story, Puck takes the form of a 3-footed stool and she takes her seat on it. Then she tumbles over and cries, "Tailor," at the sudden fall backwards. This sight of the old woman falling for no apparent reason in the midst of a very sorrowful story makes the whole gathering burst out in a fit of laughter, becoming in fact boisterous in their merriment. They enjoy the comic sight far more than the pathetic tale of the old woman, and admit that they have never had a merrier time in their life. Puck the Hobgoblin relates here one of his mischievous tricks. Annotations: Aunt, old woman, a common term for old woman in older days in English villages. Bum, bottom. Tailor cries. Dr. Johnson thought he recalled hearing this said, adding, quote, "He that slips beside his chair falls as a tailor squats upon his beard," unquote. This refers to the custom of crying tailor at a sudden fall backwards. Hume holds the cry may have been associated with the tailor's posture. Hume finds it primarily an indelicate reference to the posterior or tail. 9. The 9 men's Morris ellipses are undistinguishable. Act 2, Scene 1, lines 98-100. These lines form a part of the answer given by Titanic to Oberon during their quarrel in the wood outside Athens. Titanic refers to the harmful effect on everything in the surrounding regions brought about by Oberon's quarrel with her. Among other things, she says that the plot of grassy land with lines marked and holes cut on, which the villagers play the game of 9 men's Morris, have become filled with mud on account of untimely rainy weather. Also, the figures marked out on the village green for rustic sports have practically disappeared, inasmuch as nobody uses these figures for any sports at present. In other words, the quarrel between the king and the queen of the fairies has unhealthy effect on nature in villages. The grassy fields have been damaged and the villagers cannot play rustic games for their health and happiness. Notes: Nine Men's Morris is a game for two, each player having 9 pins or stones called men, and formerly played out of doors in grooves cut in turf. 3 concentric squares were cut, and the midpoints of each side were joined. The men could be men within quotes could be placed at corners or midpoints, and the aim was to remove the opponent's men by forming a line of 3. The word Morris is a corruption of merles, M-E-R-E-L-S, from Old French. Page 12. Quaint mazes. A number of turf mazes, that is, labyrinths, or figures which were marked out on the village green in an intricate course so as to bewilder the players. Wanton green, luxuriant grass. Comment. Titania means to suggest that their quarrel has marred the playgrounds of the villages and has thus deprived the young villagers of their healthy exercises. Particularly the luxuriant and lush fields have been damaged. 10. A certain aim he took, ellipsis, 100,000 hearts. Act 2, Scene 1, lines 157 to 61. This is said by Oberon, the king of the fairies, addressing Puck. When Titania spurs Oberon's request to part with the little changing boy, who is the cause of their quarrel, the king decides that Titania must not leave the wood till he has tormented her for this injury or insult. He resolves to anoint the eyes of Titania when she, under the influence of the juice of the flower called love in idleness, within quotes, which will make her fall in love with the first living creature she sees on waking. He asks Puck to bring the flower which originated in the manner which Oberon describes. Cupid aimed his arrow at a chaste virgin but missed his mark, and the arrow hit a white English flower, which became purple-red as a result and was called the love in idleness. Cupid availed himself of a very opportune moment to hit the chaste virgin with his arrow. For that moment a mermaid was uttering sweet notes on a dolphin's back, which made the rough sea quiet and the stars come out of their spheres. He took a sure aim at the maiden, who was the king in a western country, and shoot his arrow, which never failed to generate the feelings of love in the mind of the person hit by the arrow. But on particular occasion the powerful arrow missed its mark, failed to hit the imperial votaries, who was thus left fancy-free, and struck a flower which came to be known as, quote, love in idleness, unquote. These lines are celebrated by the critics and commentators as the vision of Oberon, within quotes, for its excellent poetry. Annotations. Fair Vestal. This image of the fair Vestal, in brackets, resembling the chaste priestesses in the temple of Vesta at Rome, throned in the west, has often been interpreted as a compliment to Queen Elizabeth, who remained a maiden throughout his life. Vesta comes from Latin Vesta, goddess of hearth and home, and means priestess of Vesta, capital V-E-S-T-A, who had to take a vow of virginity. Hence the word stands for vowed to chastity. Throned in the west. The queen of country in the west, meaning England, because England is to the west of rising sun. Smartly, with a smart twang of the bowstring, signifying the stern determination with which Cupid shot his arrow. It seems probable that Shakespeare had the queen in mind, but it is not necessary to assume that she was present at the play's first performance, and that this took place at a wedding. See page 3 above. Oberon comes from India, line 69, or the east. Imperial votress. This majestic figure has given vows to Diana, not like the mother of Indian boy, that is Titania's, quote, order. This is in brackets, lines 123.